All right, so next we're going to be discussing the neuron, which is the cell that is involved in nervous system activity. It's involved in controlling things in the body and communicating signals throughout the body. I want to be very clear here, though, that when we looked at this picture previously and we talked about nerves, nerves are things that you can see. They will appear to be white. They tend to be kind of thick and flexible, sort of like they don't have a lot of give to them. They can press on them, and they're pretty tough. So nerves are things that you can actually see with your eyes. Neurons, also called nerve cells, unfortunately, are long strips of cells that actually exist within the neurons, within the nerves. So you'll have nerves that could have dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of neurons inside of themselves. And this is what a neuron looks like. Some of the specialized things about neurons is that they are highly specialized cells. Their job is very unique in the body. They are able to send impulses between the cells. In the central nervous system, the brain itself is actually made 80% of neurons and other supportive cells. It's very densely packed with these cells. And this is what a neuron looks like in a dish. You can see it has that unusual look to it. They have extreme longevity, which is good because they are amitotic. They are non-regenerative, and so after birth, you actually have quite a few more neurons than you are going to end up with, and you prune out a good number of your neurons as you get older, as you start to develop the precise thoughts in certain directions. Then certain neurons will be pruned out, and you end up with a certain number of neurons, about 100 billion in your brain. There's some estimates about 100 billion of them, and these are basically going to live with you as long as you live. So they have extreme longevity. So if you live to be 100, your neurons are also going to be 100 years old. They are non-regenerative, which is sort of one of the famous qualities of them, although there are some exceptions, which we'll talk about a little bit down the line. But basically they cannot regenerate, and so once they are damaged, there's no actual repairing of them. They also have a very high metabolic rate, which means that they have a high need for oxygen and glucose. They can only exist without oxygen and glucose, like without a steady supply of oxygen and glucose, for about 4 minutes. So after a person has a stroke, which for one reason or another, there's basically two types of strokes, but either of them end up with the same basic idea, is that the neurons in a region of the brain are actually deprived of oxygen and glucose, and in that case there's only 4 minutes while the neuron survives, and after that time you'll start to have what we call brain damage, which is cell death or neural death. Let's take a look at the parts of a neuron here. This is the cell body. It is a traditional cell. As much as it looks like a very unusual cell, it is a traditional cell in that it has a nucleus, organelles, mitochondria, many mitochondria. It's very metabolic. So those will all be located in this part of the neuron, which is called the soma, or the cell body. There are also regions of the neurons that bring information into the cell body. You could consider these like the afferent parts of the neuron. These would be the dendrites. So the dendrites are the receptive regions. They bring information toward the soma. They are often highly branched, and they have structures called spines. Spines are able to grow into longer dendrites. And so here we have a tiny little dendritic spine, and if there was anything of interest going on, it's possible for that dendrite to actually grow a totally new branch in the direction of a particular signal that this particular neuron was interested in. In that way, then, neurons are capable of new growth. They themselves cannot regenerate, but they are capable of growing actually quite a bit and changing quite a bit, and this is called neuroplasticity. Okay, next we have an axon. The axon generates impulses away from the soma, so you could consider this the efferent part of the neuron, which brings information from the cell body. There is only one axon per neuron. There are oftentimes some branches, but only a few. And then there are going to be what we call, there's a number of different words, terms for this last part of an axon. We're going to call them axon terminals, which is a nice descriptive anatomical term, I think. I think it's the best one for this. So you can actually have many axon terminals, dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of axon terminals. So you can only have one axon, but many, many different axon terminals. And each of these could talk to several different cells. Or I should say, you could have then an axon that talks to several different cells, because you could have so many different axon terminals that actually communicate with many different cells, for example. And just so we kind of keep the conversation going, if you wanted to draw this in your notebook, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea. An axon terminal would talk to, if it was, for example, talking to the next neuron in line, it would very likely be talking to the dendrite of the next guy. So my suggestion to you would be to draw neuron number 1 and then the next one, which would be neuron number 2. So neuron number 1 would be talking to neuron number 2. Okay, the last part, and possibly the very most important part of a neuron, is the axon hillock. Axon hillock, which is labeled right here. This is the most proximal part of the axon, the most proximal to the cell body. And the reason it's important is that this is where the decision is made whether an impulse is going to be carried on or not, whether the soma has enough signal to pass on information to the next neuron in line. We'll talk all the details about exactly how that works. Okay, so this is where the impulse begins. The impulse is called the action potential.